Remember I told you that functions are very similar to what we did with graphs? Well, this lesson is definitely a perfect example of that. In this lesson, we're going to talk about these things called linear functions, but remember, we already talked about linear equations when we made lines. So we're really just talking about our linear equations, only now we're using a different word, which is function. The only exception is that you can't talk about vertical lines, but don't worry about that. Vertical lines aren't considered a function. A linear function can be written in the form y equals mx plus b. We already know that formula. Fantastic. So we're going to take these dots and we're going to write a linear function that relates y to x. What that means is write a y equals mx plus b equation. Don't say, Miss Lean, I don't know how to do this question because I don't understand the directions, because I'm telling you, it just says find the slope and intercept and put it in an equation. So let's do that. So if I count from one dot to another, I'll just use these two. It's up 3, right 2. So that makes the slope positive 3 over 2. I conveniently already picked the y-intercept right here, 0, negative 3. So now you just put it all together. Y equals 3 halves x minus 3. Done. Next one. I'm going to do the same thing for this next one. I'll use these 2 points. It's down 1, right 2. So that means my slope is negative 1 over 2. Remember, negative is because I went down. My y-intercept is right here at negative 1. So the equation, or the function, sorry, I got to use my fancy terminology, is y equals negative 1 half x minus 1. All right. Now let's look at these functions in table format. In order to find the slope using the table, I have to remember my slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So now I'm going to pick any 2 points from the table. I'll just do these 2. So this is the point negative 3, 9, and this is the point negative 1, 5. So to use the slope formula, it's going to be 9 minus 5 over negative 3 minus negative 1. And that gives me 4 over negative 2, which is negative 2. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you need to go back to chapter 4 and learn the slope formula. So now I got the slope. The slope is negative 2. And the y-intercept is right here, because it's where the x value is 0. So it's at the point 0, 3. So let's put it together. Y equals negative 2x plus 3. All right, we got one more practice. I'll pick 2 points. I'll do that one and that one. So this is the point negative 2, 2. This is the point 1, 2. So in the slope formula, it would be 2 minus 2 over 1 minus negative 2. That gives me 0 over 3. So my slope is 0. The y-intercept is right here because it's when the x value is 0. So 0, 2 is the b value. So now I put it all together, and we get y equals 0x plus 2. Do you remember the better way of writing that? It's y equals 2, because if there's 0 x's, don't write any x's. All right, we've got this story problem. It gives us a table. It tells us a story about an UAV used for surveillance, kind of like a drone, I guess. And they give us a table of the height that it is after a certain number of minutes, and we have to write and graph a linear function that relates y to x, and remember that just means y equals mx plus b. So the first thing I actually want to do is go in the graph grid and do the graph first. Then we can write the equation. We could do either one first, but I think it's easier to get the visual first. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and make the grid and plot those 3 points on the graph. But just so we all have the same graph, I'm going to start it up for you. So let's draw our axes, and we're all positive because you can't have negative time or negative height. So now on the x-axis, we're going to talk about time. So that's going to be seconds. And the y-axis is going to represent the height in thousands. And let's go by fives. Now, one thing that I noticed when we did the scatter plot chapter was that people did not have their scale equal. Every box has to represent the same amount. So if you go by fives, every single box has to stand for fives. You can't start at 15 and then go by fives. So I started at 0, went by fives. And then for this, I don't think that we'll be able to go by fives because I actually already counted. But we could go by tens. All right, so now that we have our numbers, I want you to pause the video and I want you to just plot those 3 points and press play when you're ready. All right, that's what I got. I extended the line. I found the 3 dots. So I did the graphing part, so check on that. Now I have to write an equation. Now, because the graph isn't going by ones, I'm not going to encourage anybody to count boxes, because when we have a picture, it's easy to count boxes. But if it doesn't go by ones, then it's tricky. So I'm going to use the chart and the slope formula. So I'll rewrite the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and now I'll plug in my numbers. I'll use those two. So it is 65 minus 60 over 0 minus 10. That gives me negative 1/2 as the slope. I can see the intercept is at 0, 60 right from the graph right here, the y-intercept. So I'll just put it all together in an equation. Y equals negative 1/2 x plus 65. Okay, check on writing, check on graph, and now we just go to the next question. And the next question is a doozy, and I don't know why, but a lot of kids forget what it means to interpret, and interpret means to write a sentence using the labels. So, negative 1/2 is the slope. What does that mean in terms of this drone flying in the air? Negative 1 stands for the y value, and 2 stands for the x value. So what this means is that it goes down 1,000 feet every 2 seconds. Remember, slope has each, every, and per. And now the intercept, that's my starting value. It starts at 0.65. So I'll write 0.65. That means the UAV starts 65,000 feet in the air. All right, I'd like you to read this example and press play when you're ready. Okay, The question is asking you which company charges more per cubic yard of mulch. Per is a slope word. So the slope in this equation is 29. What you have to do is find out what the slope is from the chart. And I'd like you to use the slope formula. And when you have the slope formula done for the chart, press play, and then we'll answer the question together. So that's the slope for the chart, and the slope for the equation was 29. So company A has $29 per cubic yard, and company B has $33.50 per cubic yard. So obviously company A is cheaper. So what we're going to write is company B charges more because that was more expensive. And instead of just saying it charges more, let me actually answer the other part of the question because this other part said how much more. So I'll just do 33.50 minus 29, and that is 450. So I'll say it charges 450 more per cubic yard. All right, so there we are, and if you have any questions, write them down and ask me when you come to class.